I've always been one of those kids that liked hanging out with her parents. I could still remember us sitting on the couch watching the Carol Burnett show. We'd laugh until we cried. And that was my idea of a good time, good Saturday night, up until my teens. Of course, time moves on and things change. But what never changed was the bond between my parents and I. And that bond is why one cold February morning in 2003, my father called me and he said that he felt sick again and he wanted to go to the doctor, but he didn't think he could drive. I said, okay, I'll be right there, Dad. I hung up and I cried for a moment as the reality rushed over me that he had to be really sick. You see, my dad, in 30 years of working, probably called in sick 3 times. And in the month that preceded that phone call, he had called in sick 3 times in 1 month. I picked him up and we drove to the doctor's office in silence. We got there only to find that the doctor had been called away on an emergency. I explained my father's symptoms to the nurse, and she sent us down the hall to the cardiologist. The cardiologist saw my dad right away, and then he called me into the examination room. And he explained that based on his EKG results, he had already had at least 1 major heart attack. He scheduled him for a cardiac catheterization to take place in 2 days and prescribed nitroglycerin tablets. The morning of his procedure, the doctors explained everything to us, to my sisters and I, and said it would take 2 to 3 hours. So we decided we should get something to eat. When we returned, the nurse runs up to us and she says, "Are you the Fleury family? The doctor's looking for you." And we stopped in our tracks because we knew something must be wrong. The doctor appears a few moments later, and he's speaking, and I can hear him, even though the pounding of my heart, the sound fills my ear, but I can hear him. And the first thing he says to us is, "We couldn't do anything." And we're in stunned silence, and we wait. He said, "Mr. Fleury's blockages were too significant for us to address. He will have to have bypass surgery if he's a good candidate." My younger sister, Raina, said, "If? What does he mean, if?" And she runs out of the waiting area. My older sister, Jeanette, sits down, puts her hands together, brings them to her face, and silently cries. I digest what he said, and I focused on the fact that my father is alive and waiting for us in the recovery room. I turned to Jeanette and I said, "Listen, we have to go in and see Dad, and he can't see us crying." She dries her tears. We go in, we see him. We find him sitting up. He's talking to the nurse. He's himself, although he's speaking in hushed tones that are not like him, and I could see a bit of fear and confusion in his eyes. Everything moves quickly, and he's scheduled for his bypass surgery 2 days later. The morning of, my sister Raina and I get there at 7 a.m. so we can see him before he goes in. We kiss him on the forehead, and we tell him that everything is going to be fine. Later on, we're met by some other family members, and we go to the post-surgical waiting area. So in this waiting area, there's a table in the corner of the room, there's a staff member there, and there's a phone on the desk. And when the phone rings, the staff member answers the phone, calls out the name of the patient so that the family members can get information. We're waiting, and they say, "George Fleury." I get up, I walk over to the table, I take the phone in my hand, and I turn my back to my family because I couldn't bear to be looking at them if the news was bad. The surgeon cheerfully tells me that his triple bypass went great, he's resting comfortably, and we can see him in a few hours. I turn and I face my family and I put my thumbs up. I make my way over to them and I tell them exactly what the surgeon said. And in that moment, my heart was so full of gratitude. Gratitude for my father picking up the phone and calling me that morning. Gratitude to the quick-thinking nurse that sent us down the hall to the cardiologist. Gratitude to the cardiologist that saw him immediately and scheduled him for the cardiac catheterization. And gratitude for the surgeons that performed his triple bypass. You see, all of these things happened just in the nick of time. Just in the nick of time to save his life and to save us from losing him. Thank you.